How's it going? Thralls of Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we got another album review for you. Today we got a copy of Humanity's Last Breath's new album, Abyssal. This came out on Unique Leader, and it'll be out on Friday. And they are I guess, genty deathcore, some proggy elements, maybe some blackened death metal. Yeah, they're kind of all over the damn map. They've been around since 2009. They're from Sweden, and I believe their drummer actually plays in a gent band called Viljarta, which I'm familiar with, and I think I pronounced that right. I don't know. Tell me if I fucked that up.
I've never known whether or not I pronounced that band correctly.
Anyway, it was a pretty interesting listen.
I mean, I've liked these guys. I have their first self-titled album, very Meshuggah-ish.
The production I thought was very similar to Meshuggah's Colossus, which I really like that album. Some of the songs are a little uneven on that one, but the production is some of their heaviest, and it sounds fucking great.
Yeah, if you're into heavy albums, this is definitely one of them.
It really doesn't waste any time with the opening track, Bursting the Bowels of Tellus.
Yep.
It comes right in, you know immediately these are some seriously down-tuned 7-string guitars, and they sound massive as fuck.
Sounds like an Acacia Strain tone.
Yes, Acacia Strain definitely came to mind when reviewing this, especially the more down-tempo moments.
Yes.
Which there's a fair amount of these. The vocals are pretty good, except for the fact that there's a lot of weird effects that come in and out.
It's kind of like a robotic / almost like alienistic moment, but it occurs. It was cool in the beginning. I thought, well, that's a new element for them. That's cool because they're not typically known for that, at least on their other albums. So I thought, like, all right, something else to play with. But it occurs throughout every song on the album.
And it's very layered, too.
Yes.
Like, it's not just one effect over one vocal part. It seems like multiple vocal parts that are each layered with this spacey...
Definitely a lot of post-production throughout.
It's well-produced, but I think it's almost overly produced to a degree because it doesn't sound entirely natural.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they could replicate a lot of this live.
I mean, it's a good, meaty, beefy sound.
Yes.
I mean, it's
drums sound fucking fantastic.
The drummer is amazing. I give him props. It's a very syncopated album, which is typical of most gent anyway, but he's really on it. So
and they bring in elements of death metal and even some blackened death metal. I especially really liked the instrumental 4 sword with an umlaut over the O in 4. It was a straightforward song. It stuck with the 4/4 time rhythm almost the entire time.
Yep.
There's cool atmospheric keyboard parts that really weren't like predominant in the mix. They were just the little extra dressing.
It sounds like Blackened Death, to be honest. It reminded me, honestly, a little bit of Enslaved.
Yeah. Like right away, that was the first band I thought. I was like, this actually almost sounds like an entirely different band.
Yeah, it sounded like a different band. It sounded like they just went for it and said, fuck it, let's try something new.
I mean, I looked at my phone to make sure we were still listening to the same album. And it was an interesting turn because this was a song that really stood out on the entire album because almost nothing else sounded like that. There were scattered moments that did, but this entire song was really well put together. It's catchy, the melody was very prominent, it was still very heavy.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was one of my favorite tracks on there.
Another song, Sterile, had a very, very iron dissonance tone to it. Kind of Meshuggah-esque melody that came behind it. Sounded a little bit like Black Crown Initiate at times, too.
Yeah.
It was one of the more cohesive songs on the album.
Yeah, and it stood out like... They had a lot of stuff that repeated in terms of like tricks they like to throw in each song, like, these big, beefy, giant breakdowns and squealing guitars.
Yep.
Just to make them stand out a little bit. But I think they go to the well a little bit too much in that. But this song, I thought it really worked, except for the ending, which drove me nuts because they came in...
Yeah, dude, it was a really awesome riff, and then it just was like, done.
Yeah, it was just done. Like, they could have built on that one, and even done like a slow fade out, because it was a really catchy moment, and it was a good driving rhythm.
And that was another problem I had with this album, is it was just a riff farm, pretty much. And every time it got into something cool that could have been a cool riff that they could have let go on for a few more measures, they'd switch it.
Yeah.
Kind of like a car bomb.
Yep.
Almost.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like lack of stick-to-itiveness when it comes down in those moments. Like, generally, I figure that when you're writing a song, you've written a part that is a catchy fucking headbanger right away. You'd want to stick with it, or even bring up that moment a few more times. Now, they do that occasionally, but it's very sporadic on this album.
Yes.
But yeah, they kind of just move on to the next part or squeeze in a breakdown in between those parts and come back to it. And at that point, I'm wondering, what's the point of that breakdown? Because
Right,
you're going to have that breakdown.
Don't get me wrong,
later.
And the breakdowns are just heavy
They're good.
as nuts. They're really good, but they don't last long enough. You can't catch it. You can't really grasp onto anything, and that kind of killed it a little bit for me.
Yeah. Now, I thought Pulsating Black was a really good song in here. Has almost a Fear Factory-esque sort of opening, that very syncopated rhythm, except maybe like a mix with Meshuggah. And it almost had like kind of an atmospheric death metal part, not too dissimilar from Black Crown Initiate or even Rivers of Nile. That was the one that sort of hinted at a little bit of that black and death metal sound that, you know, Force Org was the next track up. And
Pulsating Black actually had some groove to it.
Yeah.
It was a little bit different from the syncopated, genty, you know, mix-up of stop-start and odd timing. It had
the chanted vocals, too.
Yes.
That was really cool, too. That was a vocal effect I didn't mind. I was like, no, that's really good. That kind of gives it this giant gothic feel to it. I thought the instrumental being was really interesting. It opens up with, it seemed like a spoken word, but it might have been a movie or speech excerpt from something.
It reminded me of Fear Factory.
Yeah.
What the last track off of Obsolete?
Oh,
Resurrection?
No,
Or Timelessness.
Timelessness.
Yep. It reminded me a lot of that. And for the first probably 30 seconds of the song, there were no drums. Like, I thought it was just going to be like this weird, like, eerie, droning melodic guitar.
Over some spoken word. It's really staticky, too, so it kind of crackles and hisses.
Yep.
And it was good atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, and eventually the drums come in and just rip. I mean, again, the drums rip on this whole album, so...
Yeah, and I don't dislike breakdowns, but when you're overusing them too much sometimes, it's a bit much. But I like the fact that this song in particular transitioned from a really cool breakdown, very Ion Dissonance-esque.
Yes.
Moved into a cool blast beat part that didn't seem like a knee-jerk transition, and then even just still kept with that same doomy, atmospheric sort of riff, and added a breakdown underneath it, and it actually really worked.
Yeah.
It was a smooth transition, and... you know, it made for a standout song, I thought.
Yeah, because that didn't occur throughout much of the album.
Yeah, and that was my main issue with it, is it had memorable parts to songs, but not necessarily the most memorable of songs.
Correct.
And that just kind of stuck with me. I was like, take some of these cool moments and extend them a little bit further, and I think you have better songs in turn. And the songs, for the most part, only run about 3.5 minutes. There's a couple of longer ones, but for the most part, they stay in that range. So... it's a lot of condensed stuff.
Yep.
You know, a couple of longer songs might have helped them, a little bit more atmosphere building or some tension building instead of abruptly shifting. I think would have made for a better album.
Agreed.
So all in all, I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think it's a good album, and I think there's a lot of potential with this band. I think they are insanely talented. They just need to hone the songwriting craft just a bit more and really just dial in on those moments where they know they've got a fucking killer moment.
Yeah, and I mean, for being around since 2009 and you only have 2 albums, 3 technically, and a couple EPs, I mean, like, the last album released in 2016, 3 years later, I mean, it's not like metal doesn't have stuff to work with. Metal's a really interesting game these days because everybody pushes that envelope.
Yeah.
This band from their earliest release had a way different sound, so there's definitely some more elemental things thrown in here. They're getting there, you know, and I'm curious to see where they're going to go. I'm personally going to give it 3.5 stars. A lot of what you said, they're going to get there, and I do like this band, and I'm curious to see where they go. And riff farming is nice. The drummer kicks ass. I think it was a good listen. I just think that there are some things that I would have liked to have seen that didn't appear, but that's not to say they're not going to appear in the future. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, sub. We do shit like this all the time. Love to hear your comments, what you think about this album too. Let us know.
Take care, guys.